Well, unfortunately, a lot of mine and your friends have not gotten the opportunity to leave the company on their own terms. This past week was D-Day for a lot of guys, mass layoffs, some of the biggest cuts maybe in company history. Lots of rumor and innuendo as to whether or not the cuts are done. And it was quite the list, including Rusev, your old pal Heath Slater, the Good Brothers. The talent list goes on and on and on. Zach and Kurt and so many others. Were you surprised when you saw the layoffs this past week, or what's the feeling you get as you see that news come across your phone this past week?
Well, I've seen it before. I don't couldn't tell you the year, but one year after WrestleMania, there were 17 guys let go, and there was no pandemic. There was no coronavirus. It was one of those things where you went, Jesus. And then you ended up getting to TV. Okay, 17 guys got fired. Who are we going to beat today? We got all this TV to produce. Who are you going to beat? Should have never let those guys get out of here without at least doing business on the way out. And you know what the answer was? No, they're just faking injury. We end up paying them for 6 months. That whole theory just stinks to high heaven. But when you got a world crisis now, like we have, and things are the way they are and things are shut down, for all these people, and a lot of them are very good friends of mine, a lot of these people to lose their job just breaks your heart. And the reality of the matter is, which I read, and I'm sure it's accurate, after cutting all these guys, but before that, the company was in line, even with all the things that have happened in the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks, the company was still on a pace to have their highest earning year. Now, unless that's a bold-faced lie coming from an independent source, why did you need to cut all these guys if you're in line to have your biggest year yet? Because you look at those TV contracts and you look at the Saudi Arabia deal, you're talking a whole bunch of money. That being the case, did all those people have to lose their job at the worst time possible? It breaks my heart. It's a shit deal. Could it have been avoided? You tell me.
You mentioned a minute ago the statement given to you about why wouldn't we keep these guys around and let them do business on the way out? Somebody said, "Oh, well, they would just fake an injury and we'd have to pay them for 6 months." Do you want to say who said that?
Not really.
Okay.
It was just someone in a position that that knows the boss's thought process.
I understand.
One of his inner circle. I mean,
I think we can probably guess, but hey, it's Conrad Thompson and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Conrad. Really doing great. Feels like spring here and getting to spend some extra time outside with the dogs and the family and just having a great time.
Well, and we're having a great time. We're going to be talking about, I don't know, a rather interesting pay-per-view in history. Such a weird moment in time the year 2000 was for WCW. Of course, we're talking about Spring Stampede 2000. We just passed the 20-year anniversary of that show. But before we talk about nostalgia, I thought right at the top of the show, we should talk about some major changes that have happened in professional wrestling over the last week or so. A lot of guys that you and I know have been released from WWE, and you've been on the other side of that call a couple of times. What did you think when you saw this massive list come out this week with all the layoffs and furloughs?
Oh man, I felt bad for everybody involved. I felt bad for the fans. I felt certainly bad for the talent that was involved. I felt bad for WWE as a company, because I know that had to be an extremely difficult decision. Not just because so many of the talent that were released had been with WWE for a long time. They were obviously valuable, or they wouldn't have been there in the first place. But, when you develop a 5, 10, 15-year relationship or so with talent, and then because of circumstances that have nothing to do with the talent themselves, or necessarily the business in general, to have to make such a big cut across the boards, not just with talent, but with producers. And I'm sure there's office people that, our listeners wouldn't know, across the boards, all had to take that hit. And, it's no different than, I guess, the restaurant industry or, the retail side of the industry now, our economy. People are getting laid off through, not because of bad business practices, not because they're not performing right, not because of any other reason than the just bizarre, state of emergency, I guess, that we're in across the country that's forcing these changes. And I think it hits me a little differently. And maybe that's not even fair, I guess, to people in other industries. I'm sure it's not. But from my perspective, one of the things I think that resonates with me the most is that so many of these incredibly talented people have spent so long, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, developing their craft, learning the business, fighting so hard and working so hard and sacrificing so much to get into the WWE, to make it to the big show, as they say, in baseball at least. That now that, at least seemingly for the immediate future, everything that they've done for, 5, 10, 15 years is kind of like put on hold. And it's not easy to pick up, you've got a family, you've got responsibility, financial responsibilities. You're in the mortgage industry. You know what it's like when people are faced with such an extreme economic downturn that nobody could have planned. Nobody could have foreseen it. And these people don't have the ability necessarily to pick up and take their skill sets down the road to another company that easily. Whether, I know AEW is there, but there's only so much that AEW could, logistically absorb in terms of talent. So it's unnerving. And I've been in their shoes, the talent that's been let go. I know what it's like to sit at home and fear the unknown and wonder, what you're going to do with your life, and it's overwhelming at first, but, in a matter of days and certainly a week or 2 or 3, you start realizing that, when the mental emotional fog is clearing, that there's still opportunities out there. But man, the first couple of weeks, the first month and a half are really challenging. And like I say, I've been there more than once. So I know from which I speak in that regard. And I just feel bad for them. There's so many great talents.
As far as the in-ring guys, the in-ring performers who are still wrestling and we hope continue their wrestling career, who do you think has the biggest upside, the biggest opportunity to sort of reinvent themselves and come out a bigger star on the other side?
It's hard to say, without knowing. Let's be honest about it. There's really only one other place to go, which is AEW. I have no idea what the philosophy is or the strategy is inside of AEW in terms of developing new talent or acquiring new talent, probably would be more appropriate here. So I don't know what their needs are. I don't know what they're looking for. I don't know what their goals are. So it's really hard to say. But, you look at a guy like Rusev, I think, who is, of the group, Eric Rowan certainly, can fall into this category as well. Guys that have been used prominently in WWE the most recently doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best talent available, but let's face it, their equity is probably higher just based on the fact that they've been visible on the biggest platform in the world the most recently. So, I would, by default, I guess, if I was betting, if I was in Las Vegas, I would probably put most of my money on guys who we've seen a lot of in WWE in the last 6 months or a year. I'd be less inclined to bet money on, certain people that I'm not going to name names, but certain people that we haven't seen a lot of who were let go by WWE. So I think those guys who are, who've been on TV recently, who've been involved in angles and matches and storylines recently, I would say they're probably going to be the first to get opportunities. In terms of changing your characters, most of them are going to have to change their characters. When you leave WWE, you have to leave your character behind unless you got there with it, which in most cases today that doesn't happen. So I would say all of them will be, if not looking forward to reinventing their characters, will have to do so whether they want to or not, to avoid litigation in the future. So I think most of the talent that was let go have been around long enough to know that, this kind of thing happens. It's the entertainment business.
Right.
It's not like you're working for the post office or the federal government, for God's sake. This is the entertainment business, and the entertainment business can be fickle. You're only as good as your last performance. Your career is subject to the whims and fancies of an audience whose appetite can change rather quickly. So, most of the guys I think and ladies are probably a little bit used to this, but it's still a shock. It's still a shock.
Well, good luck to everybody involved. You and I both have some friends on those lists, and I hope things are back to normal sooner rather than later. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.